Thank you for turning in to The Journey. I am Bob Glaze, President and General Manager of Southwest Radio Church. With me is Pastor Larry Spargimino. President Trump's recent tweet banning transgender individuals in the military has caused a variety of responses. The President tweeted, "Please be advised that the United States government will not accept or allow transgender individuals to serve in any capacity in the U.S. military."
Representative Duncan Hunter, a member of the House Armed Services Committee, said, "It's about time that a decision is made to restore the warrior culture and allow the U.S. military to get back to business." John McCain, the Arizona Republican and Vietnam War hero, said Trump was simply wrong. Bill Browning, writing for LGBTQ Nation, expressed displeasure with evangelical leaders who thought Trump's ban was a good idea. Browning wrote, "While their supposed savior was best known for his radical inclusivity and teachings to love one another, these charlatans are celebrating discrimination in the name of their God." Close quotes.
Even the nation's highest military leaders seem to be caught by surprise. In a memo to all military service chiefs, commanders, and enlisted military leaders, General Joseph Dunford, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said there will be no modifications to current policy for now. The Dunford statement suggests that Defense Secretary Jim Mattis was given no direction on changing the transgender policy. Mattis had been on vacation at the time of the announcement and has been publicly silent amid questions about the president's announced ban.
It would seem that a presidential tweet was not the best way of changing a policy that was officially implemented in the summer of 2016. In June of 2016, Defense Secretary Ashton Carter announced the Pentagon was ending the ban on transgender Americans in the United States military. Carter's official statement was, and I quote it, "Effective immediately, transgender Americans may serve openly and they can no longer be discharged or otherwise separated from the military just for being transgender." Close quotes.
The acceptance of transgender individuals into the military, including those who are in various stages of transition, has raised a number of issues and problems that are not readily seen by most Americans.
Walt Heyer, who is a former male-to-female transgender who underwent sex change surgery and hormone treatment, has spent years researching the relevant issues. Among other things, he points out that the military is struggling to provide adequate health care for its veterans. Why add to this a burden of several $billion to meet the needs of transgender service personnel? Counseling, hormone treatment, and additional medical expenses for trans individuals are an additional burden on the budget and have absolutely nothing to do with fighting wars and winning battles. What if daily hormone treatments are not accessible during an extended time of combat? Will this affect the individual's ability to serve effectively? And ask Heyer, what about the growing percentage of mental and emotional disorders experienced by trans-identified individuals? Indeed, isn't the military supposed to be a fighting force and not a gender clinic?
The military is now being used as a workshop for social experimentation. Women are now sharing showers and bunks with biological males who identify as female and are therefore rooming with females. The emotional instability and conclusion is hardly the proper setting for troops who need to stay focused on the military objectives in a given situation. America's real problem today is not any so-called discrimination against transgender individuals, which, by the way, only form a very small percentage of the total number of servicemen and women.
At present, the world is being held hostage by a rogue nation that is attempting to develop nuclear warheads and missiles capable of their delivery to American allies in the Far East, and which has or will shortly have the ability to reach the United States. Both China and Russia have warned the United States not to resort to the military option. And to make their point, both China and Russia have staged military parades and showcased demonstrations of their latest weapons. There is growing antagonism between the United States and Russia. Added to that boiling cauldron is Iran's relentless pursuit of missile technology and the development of atomic energy. Iran has the will to destroy Israel and the Western world, and may soon have the technology to do so.
In 1983, the movie The Day After was aired on the ABC television network. The film presents a fictional war between NATO forces and the Warsaw Pact that rapidly escalates into a full-scale nuclear exchange between the United States and the Soviet Union. In the movie, the Soviet Army reaches the Rhine River. Seeking to prevent Soviet forces from invading Western Europe, NATO halts the Soviet advance by airbursting 3 low-yield tactical nuclear devices over advancing Soviet troops. The Soviets countered by launching a nuclear strike on NATO headquarters in Brussels. In response, the United States Strategic Air Command began scrambling B-52 bombers.
The Soviet Air Force attacks England and then hits targets in California, USA. The Air Force informs the President of the United States that the Soviets have launched a massive intercontinental missile strike against America. Over 300 Soviet ICBMs will destroy targets in America in a matter of minutes. The President gives the order to unleash our most destructive weapons on Russia. Serene country scenes in America with cattle grazing in green fields and children playing with their bicycles are suddenly transformed as ICBMs leap from American silos with a thunderous roar. The unspeakable has occurred.
While the movie gives no specifics, it strongly suggests that America's cities, military and industrial bases are destroyed. The aftermath depicts the central United States as a blackened wasteland of burned-out cities filled with burn, blast, and radiation victims. Though the movie is fiction, it is an accurate portrayal of what could happen. The title of the movie, The Day After, indicates that the movie is not about nuclear war itself, but about the aftermath.
On the day of its original broadcast, that was Sunday, November the 21st, 1983, viewers were warned that the film contains graphic and disturbing scenes. ABC and local affiliates opened 1-800 hotlines with counselors standing by. ABC then aired a live debate hosted by Nightline's Ted Koppel. Scientist Carl Sagan argued against nuclear proliferation, while William F. Buckley, Jr. promoted the concept of nuclear deterrence. Sagan described the arms race in the following terms. Imagine a room awash in gasoline, and there are 2 implacable enemies in that room. One of them has 9,000 matches, the other 7,000 matches. Each of them is concerned about who's ahead, who's stronger, close quotes. Today, however, we still have a room awash in gasoline, but there are more than 2 enemies with matches. There are several of them, and one is out of his mind. He's a chubby little man with a weird haircut. He plays with matches and has some neighbors who are giving him more matches. He's not sure of the best way to light the matches, but one of these days he'll figure it out.
The movie, The Day After, made a profound impact on President Ronald Reagan. He wrote in his diary that the film was very effective and left me greatly depressed. He also said it changed his mind on the prevailing policy on nuclear war. He saw the need for an anti-ballistic missile shield to protect the free world.
Welcome to our world, or should we say, stop the planet Earth, I want to get off. Some of the social issues that occupy the news today are minuscule in significance when compared to the scenario portrayed in the movie The Day After. It's time for Christians to get serious and to stop playing church. Not everyone is playing church, of course, but we do need to work and pray for a mighty revival. It's also time for the radical left to wake up and realize that they are way off center. The Day After makes it clear that we are facing problems of far greater significance than transgenders in the military. In its war on common sense, the radical left can see nothing but its radical agenda. Everything else dwarfs into insignificance, and the conservative right frets over the loss of its comfort zone. Our hope is not in the White House or the State House, nor is our hope in some happy weed. Psalm 146 verse 5 tells us, "Happy is he that hath the God of Jacob for his help, whose hope is in the Lord his God."
As everyone has noticed, North Korea is big on threats and tough talks. After North Korea's most recent ICBM test, the newspaper of North Korea's ruling party issued a threat in a column titled, "Heed the Warning." The paper claimed that America is on the knife's edge of life and death and slammed the Trump administration.
Speaking about that recent ICBM test, North Korea never lets the airlines or commercial vessels know when it's going to test a weapon, the trajectory of which may endanger commercial planes and ships. That intercontinental missile passed dangerously close to an Air France passenger jet that was flying over international waters near the coast of Japan. Kim Jong-un brushed off the complaints as his leading advisors, sporting a collection of medals on their uniforms, applauded the great leader for his wisdom and many accomplishments.
But while North Korea is sending out all the hot rhetoric, South Korea is preparing for a surgical strike on North Korea. Reports are coming in about the South Korean, quote, kill chain, and the mobilization of KMPR, the Korean Massive Punishment and Retaliation Strategy. It's like something out of a military techno-thriller with hundreds of precision missiles and several thousand commandos who are ready to take out key leaders in North Korea.
At the head of the kill chain is the Global Hawk, an unmanned aerial vehicle, UAV, that is operated by the U.S. Air Force and manufactured by Northrop Grumman. It is used as a high-altitude platform covering the spectrum of intelligence collection capability to support forces in worldwide military operations. It can cover and photograph as much as 40,000 square miles of terrain in one day. Its main purpose is to detect preparations for a nuclear attack by North Korea. It will be watching for a dispersal of North Korean mobile missile launchers. The movement of fuel truck convoys to support liquid-fueled missiles would be another tip-off. The mass evacuation of North Korea's elite from the cities or their migration into shelters underneath Pyongyang would be another sign of an impending nuclear launch by North Korea.
North Korea has a string of bunkers that will house North Korean officials, commanders, and communication facilities. To this end, South Korea has developed bunker buster missiles that can target a bunker with pinpoint accuracy. The missile stays intact and penetrates deeply into concrete before the explosive charge is detonated.
South Korea has also purchased the Taurus cruise missile that can incorporate stealth characteristics and has an official range of over 300 miles. It can travel just below the speed of sound and has a 1,100-pound warhead that features a pre-charge and an initial penetrating charge to clear soil or enter a bunker, then a variable delay fuse to control detonation of the main warhead. It can be used against hardened bunkers, command, control, and communication centers, airfields and port facilities, ammunition storage dumps, ships both at sea and in port, as well as bridges and other structures. It can be launched from jet aircraft inside South Korea, but reach far into North Korea. In addition, South Korea is prepared to launch several thousand commandos who will target officials and military leaders. In the last few weeks, South Korean leaders are insisting that they need nuclear weapons, just like North Korea.
With all of this preparation and expense to kill the enemy, one has to keep in mind that war is not an expensive game, but a deadly pursuit. There will be high casualties on both sides of the battle. As one looks at history and the contemporary scene in the world, war is one of the greatest proofs of human depravity and sinfulness. Adults acting like spoiled children, pounding on the table and demanding their own way.
Wars have often been blamed on religion. The 9/11 attack on civilians by radical Islamists fueled the contention that religion is to blame. However, Joseph Stalin and Mao Zedong were butchers murdering millions of their own people, but they were atheists. The Kim dynasty holds to dialectical materialism and is not religious in the traditional sense. Religion may cause some wars, but not all religions promote wars. The problem is not religion or the belief in some supreme being. The problem is sinful man who refuses to admit his sinfulness. Wars will cease when we are willing to cry out with the words of the publican in Luke 18:13, "God be merciful to me, a sinner." However, don't hold your breath. Some people are innately wicked and will never acknowledge that they are sinful. God has an answer to that problem. It's called Armageddon. Jesus will come in great power and glory and will put down all opposition and evil, and then there will be worldwide peace. Isaiah chapter 2 lays it out for us, and he shall judge among the nations and shall rebuke many people, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. Until that day, I want to challenge all of us to be faithful in sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ. Even today, we can have the peace of God and peace with God. We have a book for our viewers. It will help to put the present crises that America is facing in prophetic perspective. We try to not mince words. We think you, our viewing audience, needs to know the truth and what God's Word says about this present hour. This book is by Jeff Kinley, a pastor in Arkansas and also an author and conference speaker. Jeff Kinley believes in empowering people with vintage truth. The title of the book, The End of America, Bible Prophecy in a Country in Crisis. Our toll-free number, 1-800-652-1144. Some of the topics presented: will God's wrath fall on America? What happens when a country glories in its immorality? Jeff addresses historical and biblical precedents for the demise of a nation. It gives you sound biblical counsel and answers the question, how should I respond to the moral decline? The title of the book, once again, The End of America, Bible Prophecy and a Country in Crisis.
Israel has a long history of providing medical services for Palestinians and others who have been injured in attacks on Israel. It also has a history of providing medical care for Arabs and Muslims. Larry, tell us what you saw at Rambam Hospital in Israel when you were there last November.
Well, Bob, one of the highlights of the tour last year was a visit to Rambam Hospital in the city of Haifa. Rambam is one of the most advanced hospitals in the world. It has an underground section of the hospital that has been specially built to withstand a chemical attack, a radiological attack, and it also has a state-of-the-art Ebola unit. We had the privilege of meeting with the administrator of the hospital and a wonderful tour. But yes, we went to the pediatric section. There were many women in the waiting area who were, by their clothing, obviously Muslim. The administrator told us that some of the women and their babies were from Syria. Recently, a 9-year-old Syrian boy had been shot in the face. Part of his jaw had been demolished. The boy's father felt that his son's only hope was to go to Israel, to Rambam Hospital. Surgeons at Rambam did a marvelous job and repaired the boy's face. That was one Syrian dad who had a new regard for Jewish medicine.
There is a report in the Jerusalem Post that a top Palestinian official is looking to Israel for a life-saving transplant.
Yes, the official is Saeb Erekat. He was Israel's chief adversary at the negotiating table. Erekat is suffering from a serious respiratory disease and is on the waiting list for a lung transplant in Israel or in the United States.
Pulmonary fibrosis is a form of lung disease that can result in lung scarring. As the lung tissue becomes scarred, the sufferer will find it increasingly difficult to breathe. Erekat sometimes needs oxygen, too, in order to breathe. His condition is worsening.
I'm praying for a great move of the Holy Spirit to bring many Israelis and Palestinians to the cross. Though Messianic Jews in Israel, those who love Yeshua, are sometimes persecuted by the Orthodox community, the Messianic movement is growing. Similarly, in the Palestinian territories, there are small groups of Christians who are meeting secretly for Bible study, prayer, and fellowship. May Yeshua wrap his arms around both of them.
While we often think of Israel as a place where tourists visit biblical sites, we often miss the fact that Israel, though a tiny nation, has produced an unusual number of new inventions. These inventions impact every area of life, ranging from military effectiveness to surgical procedures and devices that save lives.
The pill cam, a tiny camera in the pill, is the invention of Homi Shamir, CEO of Given Imaging. Because of its size and contour, the human small intestine is really difficult to peek into without causing subjects an inordinate amount of discomfort and inconvenience. It is curvy and winding and folds back on itself over and over again. Mrs. Shamir developed the pill cam. It makes an 8-hour journey through the digestive tract, snapping some 60,000 photos as it makes its trip.
Some of the devices are really quite simple, such as the trauma collar invented by Dr. Omri Labosky. His trauma collar is used on unconscious patients and serves to keep their airways open while also protecting the spinal column.
Another invention is the ubiquitous flash drive developed by Israeli entrepreneur Dov Moran. Because he had lost his lecture presentation on a flight, he says he was determined never again to come to a lecture without a copy of the presentation in his pocket. Today, of course, flash drives are so commonplace that they've been turned into novelty products.
The invention that I think is really amazing is the mighty tough potato. Hebrew University professor David Levy spent 30 years in developing a powerful strain of potato that can be grown in extreme heat and irrigated with salt water. He's been sharing his findings with scientists from Egypt, Lebanon, Jordan, and Morocco.
Israel is amazing in many ways. It is one of the smallest countries in the world, surrounded by really angry people. But it has produced some of our most important inventions. Warren Buffett said this about Israel, quote, "If you go to the Middle East looking for oil, you don't need to stop in Israel. But if you go looking for brains, for energy, for integrity, for imagination, it's the only stop you need to make," close quotes.
Other Israeli interventions include earth-friendly food packaging, restoring vascular vision, pilotless drones, reducing hospital infections, clean fish farming, dip irrigation, and saving the bees.
In Romans chapter 3, verses 1 and 2, Paul asks, "What advantage then hath the Jew? Or what profit is there in circumcision? Much every way, chiefly because that unto them were committed the oracles of God."
Fox News recently featured 2 stories from Oklahoma. We will call it Oklahomans Reach Out. One is the story of an elderly woman in Oklahoma who reached out with a shotgun, shovel, and a rake handle. She is known as the Snake Killer. The other story is that of a Walmart cashier who reached out with kindness. He paid the $60 grocery bill for a young mother.
I was born in New York City, but I've been in Oklahoma since 1998 and love the place and the people.
I'm an Okie, part Choctaw and part Cherokee. But since you are the foreigner, Larry, tell us about the elderly woman who is known as the Snake Killer.
She is 72 years old, and her name is Mrs. Newby. Her neighbor, Susan Thompson, wrote a Facebook post. "Mrs. Newby killed 11 copperheads last night at her home. She's a snake killer. If you need help, call her. She is 72 years old," close quotes, Thompson wrote in the caption. Mrs. Newby won't be letting any other serpent slither their way into her life either. Thompson said her determined neighbor planned to sit outside and wait for some more snakes. The day before the post, Mrs. Newby had dispatched 17 snakes.
The other Oklahoman who reached out is Nicholas Tate, who lives in Newcastle, Oklahoma. He is studying to minister Christ in Honduras. It was on a late Friday night, and the customers in the line waiting to check out their goods were complaining about the lady at the front of the line. The lady was a bit frazzled. She was wrestling with 3 hyperactive kids while trying to unload groceries onto the conveyor belt.
Tate asked her if it had been a rough day, and she said it had. She had just signed up for a federal assistance program that helps low-income families, WIC. The woman apologized. She had never used WIC before. There was a problem. Several of the transactions did not process, including one of the most important items, baby formula. So Tate swiped the card again. It still would not work. He called for the manager, but then paused. he felt God was telling him to pay the woman's bill of $60. And that's what he did. He pulled out his own card and swiped it. The woman burst out in tears and then left the store.
A few days later, a customer approached Tate inside Walmart and showed him a Facebook post asking if he were the cashier mentioned in the posting. Turned out that the foster mom, who was so overcome with emotion that she had not thanked Tate for his kindness. So she wrote a message on Facebook hoping to learn the young man's name. Thanks to social networking, Tate and the mother did get to meet.
It wasn't too long before the television stations came a-calling with promises to make Nicholas Tate famous, but that's really not what the story is about. It's not what I did, Tate said. It's what God did through something so small. He took something so small and he glorified his name with it.
It reminds me of Psalms 34, verse 3. Oh, magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together.
Patterns that we find in the early chapters of Genesis often crop up in our own experiences. Adam blamed Eve for disobeying God. Adam actually blamed both Eve and God. He said, "The woman whom you gave to be with me gave me the fruit, and I did eat." Later on in the book of Exodus, Aaron blamed the golden calf on chance. It just happened. Have you ever seen two first graders fighting? Miss Jones comes up and says, "Boys, stop fighting." And one of the boys says, "Billy hit me first." Seems to me that in a lot of hot spots in the world and places that are about to explode into a full-fledged war, I can almost hear the words, "Billy hit me first." Here are a couple of things to remember about blame. Blame never smiles, it always frowns. Blame never reconciles, it always aggravates. Blame never forgets, it always remembers. Blame never builds, it always destroys. Someone once said, being a Christian means forgiving the inexcusable in others because God has forgiven the inexcusable in me. Satan loves it when we blame others. When we do that, we ignore the real source of the problem, ourselves. One Christian counselor said this, "The only person I cannot help is the person who blames others for his problems." That's so true. As long as we blame others, we will be victims for the rest of our lives. Thank you once again for joining us on The Journey. Be sure to be with us for our next telecast. We can find comfort in the fact that our God is eternal and that God is still on the throne, and prayer changes things.